Welcome everyone to episode 14 of Ty's Training Talking with My Dad. This is the week of March 24th, 2025. I'm Ty and here with my wonderful co-host and father, Mr. C, Tim Andrews, as always. And we are here to talk through another week of training and life ahead of Project Himalaya Run Everest. Yes, it is official. Again, if you somehow missed the news and you're listening to this podcast, I don't understand how it's possible, but if you want everything Everest regarding our announcement, you can go back a couple episodes. We have a bonus pod that'll be in your feed. It's literally just titled It's Everest, or you can go to tylercandrews.com/Everest. All of our Everest coverage will live there. So we've got our announcement video. We've got, any kind of big articles that we get written up. Those are all there. Lots of cool stuff will be added over the course of the next month or two as we get into the actual Everest climb itself. The other thing I want to remind you everybody of is we did release as well our short film, 9 hours on Manaslu. That came out last week. It's gotten really great reviews so far. We're super stoked with that. I'm really happy that everyone seems to be enjoying it because it features me and I'm very self-conscious about it. So I'm very glad it's been received well. I think we have over 40,000 views at this point, which is really cool. So
wow.
Yeah, honestly, like totally blown away
Awesome.
by that. So that's super cool for just the first, I think, less than a week, 4 days or 5 days now. So you can check that one out, tylercandrews.com/Manaslu, or if you just search 9 hours on Manaslu, it's actually on La Sportiva's page, but you'll find it there as well. And the final thing I will say before we actually dive into it and I let my dad talk is I am very excited to announce that we are releasing a book version of the 9 hours on Manaslu film, and that is going to be all in our cool down today. So stick around for the end of the episode and learn more about the book, 9 hours on Manaslu, which we are hoping to be out around the time of the Everest climb in May or June for you guys. So super excited for all these projects coming together. It's like all this stuff has been kind of in the works for a long time and it's all coming to fruition and it's super exciting. So that's all of my rambling that I'm going to do as the kind of preamble here. So let me turn it over to my co-host, Mr. C. How is your week going?
My week's going great. Yeah, it's been a nice week. We were talking earlier today. The weather is kind of funky today. It's more like February than April, but other than that, it's been great. As you know, we had your brother's significant other making an album here this week, and that was fun. Great to spend time with her and watch the process of that going on, and doing AI stuff and having fun. So yeah, it's been great.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll give her a shout out. I mean, she's a public person too. So check out Nair Na. She's on Spotify. She's on YouTube. Amazing artist,
And
fantastic
camp.
vocals. Yeah,
Yep,
all that
all
stuff.
the normal
And
music
yeah, I remember
stuff.
she was at our house. Gosh, it must have been like almost a year ago, recording the demo for this album that she's now releasing. And now, like you said, just
Well, it's
recorded, I
not
think, the
releasing.
entire
She's
album.
just recording the tracks. She finished recording the tracks, so it'll be months. I don't know, some
Yeah,
amount of
well,
time
but
before it
but
gets
the album is
released.
now happening. It's gonna be released at some point. That, as far as
Yeah,
I understand, the tracks have been recorded, and now it's all about the post production and that stuff. So
right.
I mean, both of us, we could do a whole music podcast aside from this and talk about all that. But yeah, check out Nirena, Nirenah on Spotify, YouTube, Bandcamp, all that stuff. She's awesome, super super talented
Yeah,
artist,
terrific.
musician. She did a lot of my tattoos, fun fact, designed those. So yeah, she's multi-talented.
Great artist in general. Yes, very good
Yeah.
visual artist. Hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Excellent.
good week. Hmm.
Excellent. Okay. Well, yeah, let's dive into it. Totals for this week, and kind of highlights before we get into your questions. We had 134 kilometers of running, 36 hours of training time, and 17,054 meters of vert. So another big one. This is the end of my time here in Quito. And like, this was, kind of the last really big full week. I'm literally leaving in a little over 36 hours from now. I will be on a plane, which is very nostalgic, I'd say, already feeling, but it's exciting. It's, this is the next big step
Yeah,
towards the Himalaya. So
this is
the high
it.
point for me,
Yep.
yeah, definitely the Monday's unexpected Polichaski FKT. That was super, super cool. And I don't want to spoil it. I know that's kind of our first question here. So why don't we just dive into it?
Okay. Yeah. So So let's talk about Monday first, since that was the first day and since you set an FKT. So it was a big breakthrough. Your Chosky FKT, I wrote it down here, 48 minutes, 39 seconds. So if I have my numbers right, that was 40 seconds faster than your previous best, which that's a big number. And by the way, speaking of big numbers, 17,000 vertical meters is to Mount Everest. I mean, it's not quite comparable because of the altitude, but it's basically just about to Mount Everest.
Just about.
So
Almost, not
in a
quite.
week. Yeah.
18,000 would be to Mount
We'll
Everest.
round up. We'll
I'm
round
glad
up.
I hadn't thought about that, or else I would have tried to go find another 1,000 meters somewhere.
Oh my God.
No.
Anyway, so nearly 40 seconds, which is a big number, it seems to me,
Yeah.
to drop that much off especially because you're already running pretty fast. So anyway, what's going through your mind when you hit that last, what was it, the last 1K split and realize was some point you realized you were like 15 seconds ahead?
Yeah, it was the first K. Yeah.
First K.
It was the first K. And that was when this was another one where I kind of went into that day with, I'd given myself permission to go for the FKT if it felt appropriate. We've talked about this a handful of times where I have a workout and it's okay. If the stars align and my body feels good, I know exactly where I need to be at certain points. I'm not going to push beyond what feels appropriate that day for the training stimulus. If it feels good, I'm going to give myself the green light to proceed, from this split to the next split. And so this was one where I got to that first 1K split, and I know there's a log, you run right by it. I look at my watch and it said, 6:09 and it's usually 6:25. And I'm like, okay, it sounds so small, but that's such a huge difference. And I was like, okay, you're having a good day. This is going to be a good day. Like immediately it sets up the whole day in a really positive way from a headspace of, okay, I've got room to play with that didn't feel particularly hard. So my body's feeling good. And it's just this green light to go and have fun with it. And then it's, every single split after that, I know minute by minute basically on that course at this point, because I've done it so many times. And yeah, it just kind of kept going really well. It never got tremendously out of control hard. It was a controlled hard effort, but I never felt like I was redlining. I did this in the middle of a huge training block, and it it's funny, we talk about the 40 seconds off my time from, and that was like, I don't remember, like a month ago or something that I set
pretty
that
recent.
one. And then, it's almost a minute faster than I had run a year before. And again, this is the interesting thing to me, is there's so much history for me on this route. I've been trying to set this FKT. I was trying to break Carl's FKT for like 5 years. I probably ran this for the first time in like 2018 or 2019 and ran like 58 minutes or something. And Carl had 50:45 or something, maybe. And his time was such an outlier against everyone else's time on that route. He was so much faster, and it just seemed like this impossible thing for the longest time. And, I think my PR on the route was stuck at like 55 or 56 minutes for 3 or 4 years, literally until last summer, when I really projected it and went out almost every day and was doing workouts and really getting to know the route and even cleaning up the trail like we've talked about. And then, last summer I broke Carl's mark. I broke 50 minutes for the first time. And that was this huge, huge breakthrough. And so then to be able to take that huge breakthrough from not even a year ago, this was last August, so 8, 9 months ago, and take another minute off of that, it does really speak volumes, I think, to what we're seeing, which is the continued stacking of consistent, healthy training. That's really what it is to me at the end of the day. It's nothing sexy, it's nothing more than that. It's the very boring, just every day, brick by brick. You're just getting a little bit fitter every day. You're not overtraining, and most importantly, you're just staying healthy and consistent. And I think that's what I'm seeing, and it's really exciting.
Yep. Good. Yeah. And amazing time. So glad to hear it, and congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. It was a good day.
Yeah. So then you, of course, that wasn't enough. You went and immediately did another workout, and with 20 by 1 minute at CV pace. So first of all, remind us again what CV pace is.
Yeah, CV stands for critical velocity, which is effectively your 30-minute race pace. So whatever pace you could hold for 30 minutes. So for an elite man, that's about 10K. For an amateur runner, it might be closer to 5K.
Uh-huh. So that's fast. You're running
It's
pretty
pretty
hard.
quick. It's pretty quick, especially at altitude. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So why that workout, and how do you decide when to double up versus taking time for recovery, especially since you did an FKT? So yes, it wasn't like an all-out red line, but it wasn't a jog in the park either.
Right. I think that it's funny. I've had this sensation because I'm leaving keto and I'm packing up all my stuff and I'm saying goodbye to friends. It almost feels like, oh my gosh, it's time to start tapering. Like I'm going to Everest tomorrow, but I'm not. I have like 6 weeks probably, right, until the season. So really, this is kind of still the peak training time in terms of load. Is the
Uh-huh.
block that we are just finishing right now, and then the
Okay.
next 3 week block that will come. So it's not a time to take risks, but it is a time to be pushing and training. And yes, it was a very hard effort in the morning, but like I said, it was controlled hard. There's there's this idea that I have with my athletes, and I've heard from others. John Waldron is one where when you're really tired, you just can't go all the way to the well. When you have that kind of chronic fatigue, when you're training really hard, really high volume, which I am. I'm right at this is
Yep.
the last week of my big 3 week block here. And I'm all like, my legs are full of training right now, to take that analogy. And
Uh-huh.
you can only push so hard at that point. You're not tapered, you're not fresh. So yes, I felt good that day in training. Part of that is just being fit. Part of it is adrenaline, excitement, all that stuff. At the end of the day, it's not the same as being super fresh and tapered and going out and absolutely ripping an all out race effort. So you can just, I find for me, especially when I'm training really hard, I can really only get to 80, 90%. I just can't go that hard.
Uh-huh.
And so the idea with the afternoon workout is, okay, I want to go and just, I want to get a little bit more on my body for the day. At the end of the day, it was a hard effort, but it was also only 48 minutes. It's not that long. It's not that much work for me in terms of time. And I wanted to hit a different stimulus. So this was another one where I went in literally without really knowing what I was going to do. When I got to the gym, this was a workout on the treadmill, uphill workout. I knew that I wanted to
Uh-huh.
hit a different energy system in the morning. I really like that, to combine something that's shorter and punchier and higher heart rate versus the morning, which was obviously just one long continuous effort. So I wanted to make sure I was getting the heart rate up a little bit higher, but also that I wasn't overly taxing myself. Like I very much wanted that workout to be much easier than the morning because the morning was quite hard. So that
Yep.
was where I came up with, okay, I'm going to do these very short reps. I think the recovery was quite long. It was like 3 minutes. So
Yep.
the 1 minute reps
Something
were
like that.
hard, but
Hmm.
pretty long recovery. So it was a good session, hit a very different stimulus, but that workout never really felt hard. There was never like, oh my gosh, am I going to be able to finish this? It was the whole time, okay, each rep feels pretty hard, but I'm recovering really well between them, and I'm paying attention to how my body feels, and everything felt good. And, then you do a lift, and then you have a protein drink and go home and go to bed and do it again.
Okay. Great. Um, okay. So then moving on, Tuesday was the first time you pushed the gas mask on the bike arrangement or wherever it was you were with it up to Everest altitude, right? So
Yep.
my notes have 6.6% O2. And again, for folks who aren't familiar with it, and there's no reason for most people to be familiar with it, oxygen at sea level generally, give or take 21%.
Yep.
So
21.
that means you're at, less than a third of
Yep.
normal oxygen levels. So that is the technical word is hypoxic. That is extremely hypoxic. And
Yep.
so, you know, but approximately what it is at around 8,900 meters, which is approximately the height of Mount Everest. So
Yep.
what did you notice? What was different when you raised it? You've been in 8,000-meter mountains before. You've never been up to 9,000 or close to 9,000 before. So what did you notice?
It's interesting because it felt bad, which makes sense. It didn't feel much worse than the other transitions I've made from one altitude to the next. And if anything, I mean, this is a bigger jump, right? I mean, previously I'd been at 7,700 for, I think, the last 2 weeks or so. And so this is going from 77 to 89. That's 1,200 meters. My last jump was, I think, like 7.2 to 77. So that's only 500 meters. So it's a bigger jump. It's more hypoxic, but it honestly didn't feel that much worse. I did have that same sensation that we talked about before, where the very first day, actually, it was interesting. The first day I did it, I split it in half. So the first half I did at the altitude I'd been at before, which I think was 7.7. And then I got off the
Mm-hmm.
bike, turned the crank up, and then got back on. And then did the second half. So I only had that 30 minutes the first time. I think it was the first day where I did it all, like the entire 75 minutes at 8,900 meters at Everest altitude. That was the one where I got off and I felt a little bit almost punch drunk or just drunk in general. Like I felt like I was just a little bit dizzy, and it was the same thing. It lasted for probably 20 or 30 minutes. It was not just until my O2 sat came back up, because we've talked about that before. That comes back very, very quickly. So I did have that same sensation. And again, the thing that I just can't understand is the difference between those first couple of days. That first day feels pretty bad. And then after that, I kept it there for a few days because, and we'll get to this later, I had this big hypoxic workout planned for this weekend, which, spoiler alert, I didn't end up doing, but we'll get to that. And I was going to try and basically simulate in the gym with the hypoxic machine going to the top of Everest. And that I wanted to have those first few days of feeling really crappy out of the way on the bike before I got to the important workout. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think I accomplished that. And again, the most important, or the most interesting thing is it basically felt the same as every other transition. Like even the transition to like 6,000 meters 2 months ago, it basically felt the same. So that's where there clearly is some adaptation happening here. And this is the thing where you and I were talking, I can't remember if it was today or yesterday, but you know, I don't want to draw too much from it, because clearly my body is adapting really well to dealing with hypoxic altitude or hypoxic air provided by this machine. Like that is 100% clear. I am
Yep.
getting much better at that. Now, the real question is whether dealing with this type of hypoxia provided by this machine, will that translate to real life hypobaric hypoxia in the mountains? That remains to be seen. So far, the evidence in very small doses in terms of my few trips to Cotopaxi and Cayambe have gone very well. They've shown a very strong correlation between how I've felt at those actual altitudes and how I've felt on the bike at those synthetic altitudes. But, will that remain at 7,000, 8,000, almost 9,000 meters? We shall find out.
Yeah. Well, plus it's a different thing because you'll have been running for a long time before you get to that
Yep,
8,500, 8,600,
exactly.
8,700 meters. In theory, if anything, it might help more, but only the only true test will be in the mountains. And, it's not entirely unreasonable what you're describing. Um, I know just enough about physiology to be dangerous, but I'm happy to speculate. It is quite remarkable how fast, for instance, your muscles can produce mitochondria and other things. People don't realize, most people think of biology as very slow. It's like watching grass grow. Things change over very, very long periods of time. Some of that is true, but there are other things that happen very rapidly in your body. And, you know, I was just reading today or yesterday, you can turn over an intense athlete like yourself can turn over hundreds of kilograms of ATP a day. Okay. In a
What?
single day. Yeah.
What?
Hmm.
Hundreds
Yeah.
of kilograms?
Hundreds of kilograms every day. Okay.
Wait, but
Um,
I only weigh like 55 kilograms. How is that possible?
um, I'd have to go back and look at
Where are
the
all those
reference, but
kilograms
it was
coming
a
from?
textbook. It
I
was
don't
a
eat
textbook.
hundreds
I
of
was literally
kilograms of
reading a
food.
textbook.
There's
Okay.
conservation of mass. This doesn't check out.
Uh, well, no, because it gets recycled, remember? Almost, it's
Oh,
such an
I see, I
efficient,
see. Okay, I see. Okay.
right? That's why it works so well, because it's so super efficient at
Gotcha.
using energy, right? It stores them in those phosphate bonds, which are incredibly efficient and incredibly powerful. And then you break the phosphate bond, and that's where you get the power from ATP, adenosine triphosphate, right?
Yep.
Um, and so that's how it works. And so, and I don't remember the numbers, but you can increase your mitochondria substantially in a single day, in a single workout. Your
Really?
body adapts very rapidly to that type
Hmm.
of stuff. So so I can easily see where the first day you haven't quite generated the oxidative response to be able to cope with that level of
Yep.
hypoxia, but by the next day it's there. And all of
That's
a
so
sudden you can sort of
fascinating.
cope with it. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to do in general for long periods of time, but for training for Everest, it seems very appropriate.
It's really interesting because it lines up anecdotally with how people actually behave in the mountains when they're trying to acclimate, but it does not line up at all with the accepted wisdom of how you use these hypoxic systems for pre-acclimatization. Because my understanding is that almost everyone who uses these and almost all the studies that have been done are
Hmm.
saying that you have to spend a lot of time breathing this air for it to make any difference, which is why most people sleep in a hypoxic tent
Yeah.
uh, in order to pre-acclimate for these mountains. My experience with that is number one, it's really uncomfortable. And if you have a partner, it's going to be even more uncomfortable for you and your partner because they might not want to sleep in the hypoxic tent. And that's going to cause all kinds of issues. You won't even go into that. But point being, that's almost how everyone uses it. But in the mountains, what a lot of people do is they will go from, say, Everest Base Camp and they'll hike up to, Camp 1 or Camp 2, and then they'll come back down. And so they're getting very similar stimulus to what I'm doing here, which is, okay, you're going up to, say, 6,500 meters and you're spending an hour there and then you're coming back down. And so you're getting that small exposure. And then the next time you go up, you'll feel much better. Right. So it's almost that
Yep.
same effect that we're talking about. And I've always wondered that, like, why is that? Like, what could possibly be happening on that one trip up? We're only spending a couple of hours in this important altitude that you're going to feel so much better literally the second time you go up. It's made no sense to me, but
Yeah.
now
Well,
it's certainly starting to correlate.
has anybody ever really studied it? I mean,
Um,
there's this collective wisdom that has arisen about how things get done. That's the protocol that's developed. Has
right,
anybody ever
right.
done? I
So
doubt that anybody's ever done a random controlled study
there are,
of these people go and sleep in a tent, and
yeah,
these people only go on the bike for 30 minutes or whatever.
there are definitely studies about efficacy of altitude tents. I don't know exactly how robust they are, but there's a lot of studies that basically show, hey, if you sleep in a hypoxic environment for a while, your hematocrit and your hemoglobin mass will go up,
Right.
which
And that's
makes
not what I'm
sense.
talking about.
Right.
That's comparing a hypoxic environment to nothing. It might be that sleeping in the tent, you can sleep in the tent 15 minutes and that's all you
Exactly,
need.
and that's what I'm
Right.
finding because I've also done the sleeping in the tent thing, and I've never tried this, which is the much lower exposure rate of, okay, I'm only spending an hour or so a day,
Yeah.
but I'm doing
Yeah.
it at super high altitude. So
Yeah.
yeah,
We
super
don't know
interesting.
that much and it's very hard to study. I told you, I don't know if we talked about it here on the podcast, that I read about this study of this form of exercise called REHIT,
Yep.
reduced exertion, high intensity training. And now these were sedentary people, but they took sedentary people, 20 seconds of intense intervals separated by 2 or 3 minutes of rest, 3 times a week. And they increased their VO2 max like 40% over 6 weeks.
Yep, that
Unbelievable,
makes sense.
right?
Yep. I've heard
So,
that before that
so
like
the question
very
is, what
small
stimulus
doses
is really needed?
of intense exercises like unbelievably helpful. Like what you're saying, like even just short bursts of like 20 to 30 seconds. Like even if you're walking and you just walk at a steeper
Right,
grade or a
right.
1.5 cadence or something like that, if you're an older
Yep,
person or something, that it's
yep.
unbelievably effective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So again, this just shows you how much we don't know at the end of the day. So it doesn't, we don't really know in your case because it's a single point and, we'll find out, but it's not incredibly surprising to me either. Um,
Yep.
and and you can sort of rationalize, as I was saying, the physiology of it. So that's okay. Yeah. Could make some sense. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. We've beat that one to death.
No, it's
Next.
all good.
So the other, and this is another physiological thing because I'm always interested in these things. I noticed that you actually, your heart rate actually decreased when you were doing this
Mhm.
super hypoxic effort. So when you went from 77 to 89, 7,700 meters to 8,900 meters on the bike, your heart rate actually decreased. And you said something to the effect of this is expected and something like that. So what's going on physiologically there and why were you expecting it? or
I
why
cannot.
did it comport? What did you
Yeah,
learn
I
before
can
that?
explain this in like very layman's terms. I cannot explain it in complex physiological terms. There is a study that Connor actually found about this. Effectively, your heart rate goes down as you go. Excuse me, your max heart rate goes down as you increase in altitude for a variety of reasons that are physiological with your body and the atmosphere, and your resting heart rate goes up. So what happens is your effective band of heart rates narrows, and it narrows a lot. Like my max heart rate at at sea level is probably 185 maybe, and here in Quito, which is only 3,000 meters, is probably 175. And when I go to base camp on Manaslu, for example, last year it was like 150. And when you go up higher, it just keeps going down, and it's nonlinear. So that is a well understood. Well, I don't know how well understood. It's an semi well understood and semi well documented
Okay.
scientific idea, and it's also something I've experienced anecdotally. So yeah, it does line up with what I would experience. So there is this kind of like slight adjustment as it's like, okay,
Yep.
what
Yep.
is the appropriate effort, and like what's zone one, what's zone two, that I'm trying to figure out while continuing to go up in altitude. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, it makes perfect sense. Again, I know just enough to be dangerous, so I could be completely off the mark, but I can think of a couple of different reasons. But the most obvious one is less oxygen. You have
Yeah.
significantly less oxygen, and respiration, literally the process of turning ATP into ADP, which provides all the energy in your body, including your heart, which is a muscle which needs to contract,
Yeah.
right?
So that was
Just
my
hard to get in as
first
much.
hypothesis as well, is basically the heart is a muscle, so it can't beat as fast. That's actually not it. I can't remember what it is, but it is more complicated than that. But that
Okay.
I think it's not a bad like bro science explanation. I think it kind of makes sense, and I'm sure it has part of it, but there was an actual effect that had I don't know, it had more to do
Okay.
with like partial pressure of oxygen in the lungs, or I
Yep.
can't remember.
That was going to
I'm
be
not a
my second thing,
biochemist,
was pressures of
chemist.
various types not being able to be
Yep.
sustained. Yep. Friday was your last planned Roku summit of the season. So looking back on your progression and doing some retrospection, as is a good time to do right as you leave, what improvements have you seen that give you the most confidence in taking on Everest, the biggest mountain in the world?
There's really two sides to it. I mean, obviously, number one is just the speed stuff that we've been talking about. I mean, being able to take over a minute off where I was last summer. You and I've talked many times of the whole, okay, you don't have to be fitter than you were from an Oslo. It clearly I am fitter than I was from an Oslo, so that's great because it just gives me more room for stuff to go wrong, which is coming up soon on this
Yep.
podcast. So when little things do go wrong, and some big things, and things will continue to go wrong, it you know allows me to, after I'm done having a temper tantrum, just relax and be like, okay, you're fitter, you're fine, it's all good. So I think that's
Yep.
that's the number one, and the number two I think is almost just as important, which is just the consistency on those easy days and seeing how much quicker I'm able to go up every single day at really easy effort, really moderate, low heart rates, and just stack those days day after day after day. Even last summer, I did have a little injury in the middle of the summer that came up, and I wasn't able to, I was probably on polychastity like 3 or 4 times a week, and now the last 2 months, especially, like I'm literally on there basically every day, and it's just being able to have my body be able to do that and handle that amount of vert and that amount of training volume. That has been really, really exciting to see, because it's again this idea of just continuing to stack and stack and stack. And that's how I think training works the best, is when you're able to do that, not just for a couple of weeks, but for months and months. And now this is really I would say, the third kind of big macro block that I've had since surgery that has been really, really successful here, over the last, 15, 16 months at this point. And that to me is maybe even more exciting, is just seeing that consistency played out on the very long term and seeing the progress kind of season by season. That's the really exciting part to me.
Great. Great. And I have to ask, so you had a couple of twinges, but they seem all fine. You just had a couple of
Yeah, it was a weird thing actually this morning. That I just took a weird step, I think, basically.
uh-huh.
And and it was like a weird place, like deep in my calf or something. And I was like, oh, that feels bad. And I just like immediately stopped. And it was one of these things where, again, going back to this whole idea of not getting greedy, I had thought about, okay, am I going for an FKT right now? Am I just doing a workout? And just that ability to, okay, this is not important. The most important thing is not getting hurt and not getting greedy. And I'm just going to stop. I'm going to take a few walking steps. I'm going to do some self massage and make sure that there's nothing sharp or problematic and ease back into the workout. And I did that. And then it never bothered me again. So I think it was literally just like I took a weird step and probably pulled something a tiny bit. And then it
Uh-huh.
just locked up and I was able to massage it out and continue on. I mean, this was 20 minutes into
Wait
a
till you get to
2 hour
my
workout.
age.
Yeah,
I had
we'll
that
see.
happen today where I was literally tying my shoe and I hurt my back somehow. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's just,
Sorry.
it's better, but yeah. Anyway, okay. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Your answer about, obviously having more fitness, having more margin for error, definitely should help your confidence. Um, uh, so now we can talk about your temper tantrum that you foreshadowed here. You had a little
Oh, here
problem
we go.
yesterday,
Yep.
where your altitude generator crapped out on you. So, you've in fact, when we've talked about this before, I think even on this podcast, you said the thing you're worried about is all the dependencies you
Yeah,
have, the things that are out of your control, because there are so many things,
totally.
from the weather on the mountain to all this technical stuff that you need to work. And yesterday, your altitude generator stopped working. So how do you handle these sort of unexpected setbacks now? How did you handle them before? And, is it different now because this is a high stakes moment? You can't avoid, you can say, ah, it's cool, everything's cool, it doesn't matter what happens, I follow the process. But, Project Himalaya is a big deal. So there's more pressure. So
Yeah,
what do you
that's
think? How do you
true.
how do you how
There
do you
is
feel about it? How do you handle it?
uh, there is more pressure. I think that I hope that it doesn't really impact the way that I react. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, like it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if it's a big deal or not because stressing out about it, regardless of how big of a deal it is generally not going to help. So having a healthy reaction of just problem solving is always going to be the best reaction, whether it's a tiny deal or a really big deal. It doesn't matter. That's obviously easier said than done. And I guess like let me take a step back and just like talk through exactly what happened yesterday for our wonderful audience here. So basically, as I hinted at before, I had this big workout planned for today, actually, Sunday. March 30th is today when we're recording this. And the plan is, this is probably one of two really big workouts that I was doing in my last, say, 6 or 8 weeks here in keto. One was the Cotopaxi up and down laps overnight that we talked about, I think last week or the week before, that I did with Ryan.
Hmm.
That was
Yep.
awesome. The other one
Yep.
was this one, which was literally supposed to be my second to last day in keto. And the idea was to do 8 to 10 hours in the gym on the treadmill slash Stairmaster, trying to simulate the various kind of grades of the Everest climb. Obviously, it's not at all similar to climbing on snow and ice, or especially through the ice fall. But the important thing was having a big chunk of time training with the altitude mask on at very, very high altitudes, because I've done a lot of these 1 hour bike sessions. I've done very little actual walking, hiking, running with the mask on. And
Uh-huh.
I'd done nothing anywhere near that long. So this was one that I had, again, on my calendar for a long time. It was in my mind, super important. And so here I go yesterday afternoon. I finished my bike workout. I got everything done early and I'm ahead of schedule. Great. And so I get an Uber and I take it down to the gym with the altitude generator. I get in the back of the Uber and unload it there, and I plug the machine into the wall. And full disclosure, this is it's a company called Higher Peak. They were very generous and they gave me this unit for free, which is fantastic. Thank you, Higher Peak. I plug it into the wall. It's worked perfectly. I've used it in my house. I've used it in the gym in my apartment building. No problems. I plug it into the wall. The little panel on the front flashes on for about 1 second and then it turns off immediately. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. But I'm like, that's not good. That's probably a blown fuse or circuit breaker problem. And so, long story short, Ryan and Sarah Hall were at the gym with me. And so, like, Ryan and I are literally like on the floor trying to pry this thing open. And the gym is closing in like 15 minutes. The whole point was I brought it down there to test this out and get it set up and have everything working perfectly so that I could get there right when the gym opens at 6 a.m. this morning and it would all be set up. And I was like, oh, I'm
Yep.
being so clever and planning ahead and responsible and all this stuff. And instead, this what was supposed to be a 5 minute process of plug it in, make sure it works, you know, put a little sign on the machine that says, hey, I'm gonna use this tomorrow for like 8 hours, whatever. that was that turned into like this hour-long process of Ryan and I trying to pry the machine open and like see if we could find the fuse or something, like what happened. And then that turned into this whole saga of me bringing the unit home because the gym closed and uh, having an electrician come to my house like many hours later and opening up the unit and looking at it with a voltmeter and stuff. And basically, we figured out that the circuit board was completely fried and destroyed in the unit. It was not a simple problem, unfortunately. We were like, please let it just be like a shorted wire, like something really easy to fix, and it was not. So I was yeah, I was very frustrated, I would say. And honestly, like if I think that if at like 1:30 p.m. I had known like this thing is just it's destroyed, like you can't use this, that would have been easier. But the fact that I basically was just like pacing around my apartment all afternoon, waiting for this person with the right tools and knowledge to come and help me try and sort this thing out. Um,
Yep.
and I think that part, then it was evening. It was like 7 p.m. by the time this guy left, and I figured this out. And, this was this huge workout that I really cared about. And I suddenly had to completely pivot and be like, okay, what am I going to do? And I literally got in bed and I had an alarm set for 2:30 and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go do 10 hours of laps on the Politoski. That'll be a somewhat similar stimulus. And it wasn't until like 10 o'clock at night as I was kind of tossing and turning, I was like, you know what? Like I'm trying to fit a square peg in a round hole here and I'm trying to replace this workout with something similar and it's not going to like, I'm just not excited about it. It sounds terrible. And I decided, I've been having really good success physically and mentally with these double T kind of workouts. I'm just going to do that. Like, forget the long days. Like, I don't necessarily need this one. I'll just go do a double T workout. Those have been going great. And so I did that this morning. I think we'll get to that in a minute. But and then I get home today and I have a message from this woman, Gisela at SportFix, who is a PT here in Quito, who reached out to my kind of SOS message to a bunch of runners in the area, who happens to be like literally probably the only other person in Ecuador who has a unit like this. And so then there was this whole saga today of after I had already done a hard workout this morning, I came back and figured out, oh my gosh, she has one. She could lend it to me. And so now, fingers crossed, I have it in my apartment. It's right there. And we are going to try and do this tomorrow. But that is like the ridiculous context of the story. The big
Yep.
takeaway lesson for me, which I think you've already teased, and I spent like an hour on the phone with you guys last night, just like ranting. But you know, it's the sooner that you can go from being upset to problem solving in a situation like this, the better. That's what I've found. And sometimes that means just completely separating yourself from the situation. And you and I talked about this last night and especially this morning because it wasn't even until this morning that I really kind of just processed it. But that I think for me, it was that like 6 hours of, oh, this is maybe going to work, maybe it won't, where you don't really have, I didn't give myself the mental space to move on and start thinking about what I'm going to do if this doesn't work. I was still just like, oh
Yep.
my gosh, please work,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
that I think was the hardest part for me. But it's always easier said than done. But I think, yeah, the sooner you can move on from being upset to problem solving in a situation like this, the better. And, I'm very, very grateful again for this unit and the fact that it got many hours of fantastic training in here with it over the last 3 months. And, it is what it is. Like these things happen. And I'm sure other things like this will happen. And hopefully this is a learning experience for that.
Yeah. Well, I would make a couple of observations. One, I think it is better that you went and tried it, even though it broke, because if you had gotten up at, some ridiculous
Oh, a
hour,
thousand
gotten there
percent.
at
Yeah,
6 in the
yeah.
morning and it had broken
No,
right
I
at
would have been
6 o'clock,
so much more
would have
triggered
been
in that
much worse.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, because you wouldn't have had the time to take a step back and
exactly.
think through it and distance yourself from it. Yes, I think we were talking about, again, my old colleague and friend Tim Galway had this process in the inner game of work. I think I was working with him at that time when he was writing that book, and he called it stop. So step back, think, organize, and proceed. And that's, this has been a truism of mine. In fact, I think the first time I met Tim, I told him that that was my mantra. He said, when I was working as a programmer and in general, my mantra was stop. I had a saying even when I was a kid, the best thing you can do about a bad day is end it. Just go to bed and you'll wake up the next
Yeah.
day, hopefully. and and when I was a programmer, I ran into this all the time. We used to have a joke. Yeah, honey, I'll be right there. One more bug. 3.5 hours later, here's one more bug, honey. I swear, one more bug, and I'll be done. And any programmer can relate to that who's lived that life. And I found that oftentimes the best solution was just to leave. You spend a half an hour if you're
Yep.
beating your head against something, stop, because your ability to see the solution that's right in front of you is limited when you're emotionally entangled in it. And if you can just break yourself apart from it, showers, sleep, anything, even just a walk around the block, it can often help. And then your mind starts finally being able, as you said, to get into problem solving mode instead of why is this happening to me and why is the world so terrible mode. And
Yep.
so I'm glad you got there, and it looks like it came out okay. Um, the other thing that you mentioned, which is also quite understandable to all of us, I think, is the maybe it's going to work is almost the worst place to be,
Mm,
right?
yep.
Because you just
Yep.
don't want to give up. It might work. It might
I
work. It
know.
might
I
work.
was I was just holding
Um,
out hope till the last
yep.
minute, literally till we like
And
closed the
there's
back
a
box up, and he was like, "No, it's not going to work, man." And I was like,
yeah,
"God
it's
damn
not going to
it."
work, right? There is uh, a term in psychology called intermittent reinforcement. And this is the
Mhm.
strongest and kind of reinforcement, the most difficult kind to break. And that's basically what it describes is this idea that it comes from training rats. If you really want to train a rat in a maze, don't give it food every time. Give it
Right.
food
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
on
It's
random
unpredictable.
times.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly. Yep. It's why like
And then it
casinos are
will have
so
the most
effective
incentive.
and addictive. Yeah.
So, but it also makes it the hardest to disengage and the
Yep.
hardest to deal with emotionally because maybe it'll work. But anyway, I'm glad you got through it. Most importantly, I'm happier about that than even about your finding another one. But that's good as
Yep.
well. So let's talk about then about what did happen on Sunday. So you got through this tossing and turning and said, okay, I'm just going to do my normal double workout kind of thing because that makes a lot more sense, which I think was probably a good insight on your part, and a tribute to you both physically and emotionally that you could mentally as well that you could get there. So congratulations on that part,
Thanks.
and then you ended up doing an FKT. It's like, how does that help? And what does that really mean to you? How did that make you feel after what you had been through and processing the blow up of your original generator?
It was a special day for a bunch of reasons. So, first of all, I think that ability to pivot, so much of it for me was just the idea of being excited about the workout. When I went to bed and I was thinking about doing 10 hours of up and down on the Polichowski, I was like, I love that trail, but that just sounds really miserable. I don't want to do that really. And when I pivoted and I kind of looked at my training log and I was like, okay, if I were just doing another double T day, what would make sense? Oh, like 10-minute reps. Cool. That sounds fun. And extending that a little bit all the way to the summit made sense contextually, just in terms of adding a little bit of volume. And then, oh, okay, like I could probably break my own record to the summit if I did that just as a workout. Again, keeping it appropriate. And that's so that really changed my mindset going into it. I went from this sense of, woe is me, this sucks, I had this huge thing, now I don't get to do it, I'm losing all this confidence, to, hey, now I have something that I'm really excited about. an opportunity for me to gain confidence, gain fitness. It's going to be a cool day. That was just a really nice pivot for me mentally. The other thing that was a very cool coincidence, which I figured out kind of at the last minute, is that this was actually my 100th trip up the Polichosky. Um,
Wow.
so that was really cool. I literally was updating I have this, big thing on my wall. It's a big, literally a piece of graph paper, like an easel sized piece of graph paper where I put my time and heart rate for a bunch of different segments. And Polichosky is obviously the most common one, but it's, Polichosky and Horses Climb and all the way to the summit, the things that we have talked about a lot on this podcast at this point. And yeah, I was at 99 and I was like, oh, man, am I going to get 100? I guess like maybe Monday, Ryan and I will go just do like an easy hike and tag 100 together. That'll be fun. But this felt very special because, it was an early morning. I started at like 6:30, so I got up there before all the tourists, and I had a nice workout. So it was a good, I felt good about the effort. Okay, I hit 100, and then I ran all the way to the summit. And it was this beautiful day. We were above the clouds, and there's no one there because I was still before the cable car. And it just felt, yeah, it was a really nice way to turn everything around. I think even if all this stuff with the new tent coming up hadn't happened, I would still be in a much, much better headspace just because I had completely reframed the situation and turned it into something joyful and fun and also good for my confidence and I think good for my, physical training.
Yeah. And another thing that sparks my mind, at least, and resonates with me is what you did was you turned it from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation. So
Yeah,
when you
100%.
lost the generator, you had this extrinsic motivation. Well, I have to do something like that, and I'm really upset that I lost the ability to do that. So I have to punish myself because I knew it was going to be punishing if I had to do, however, some huge long thing at some super hypoxic altitude. You've said all the time it feels bad, but you're intrinsically motivated to do it with the altitude thing because you know it's going to help you, in theory, get up Everest. Whereas
Right.
running up and down the Polichosky you just didn't have that intrinsic motivation, even if, because it wasn't really it sounded to me more like you just needed to self-flagellate a little bit, and
No,
that
I
was
don't
going to
think
do it.
that's fair. I think
No,
it wasn't so much self-flagellation. It was more just like, oh, this was supposed to be a long, continuous day,
on
so I
hard
should probably
workout.
do a long, continuous thing,
Yeah.
as opposed to a shorter, harder thing.
Okay.
And
So I take it back then.
so, yeah, no, but it's fair. It was more just like I said before. I think the idea of trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It just
Yeah.
there wasn't really a good replacement for that workout that I could do. That
Right.
was the thing. It was such a
Right.
specific stimulus that I was looking for,
Hmm.
that going out and just doing laps on the Polichosky for 10 hours, beyond the fact that I would have had to start in the middle of the night to beat the afternoon storms, like there were just so many big problems with it. And I knew that, like, subconsciously, even before I could put it into words. And that's, I think, why I felt so much better once I was able to pivot to doing something I was stoked about.
Yeah. Great. And congratulations. Yet another
Thank you. Yeah.
FKT for Tyler
Number one
Andrews.
and number
Yeah.
100. That's very exciting. 100
And number
climbs.
100 up the Polichosky. Exciting for you. I'm glad it wasn't me. Okay, so you're just about done in Quito, and
I
we'll be
know.
seeing you in a couple of days, which we're looking forward to and very excited about. So looking back over these last 3 months in this whole training block, what are you most satisfied with? Sort of what do you think still needs the most work? Where are the gaps that are left still?
I've said it before, but and it's probably getting boring at this point, but just the consistency is, I think, the thing that I'm most satisfied with. I had, I think there was like one week where I was pretty sick with that stomach bug, like early in the season.
Yep.
And then I had the trip to Switzerland. And other than that, like, well, even in those weeks, that's the thing. Like, even when I was sick, I remember talking about this on the podcast. It's like I was still able to get in the training volume that I wanted those weeks. Maybe I just had to switch it to the gym or something instead of on the trails, but I was still able to get in the training. Even in Switzerland, I was able to get in training with all the travel and recovered well. And, I don't think that I really missed a single day of training or a single important workout. I think I did a really good job of building patiently and just being consistent, getting in workouts that made sense, getting in a lot of volume, but doing it a way that was safe and not getting injured, knock on wood. that's the thing that I'm most satisfied. So I think my physical fitness is honestly about the best it's ever been, especially for something like Everest right now. I wouldn't want to go run an all-out 5K or even a marathon. Um, but definitely for this kind of project, I'm as fit as I have ever been in my life, and that is tremendously exciting.
Yeah.
In terms of the things that really still need work, I think what my main focus when I'm in Nepal, I think, is going to be getting super comfortable on the kind of terrain that I'm going to be on Everest. So I will be training on you know, 22,000 glaciated peak. And I think the idea there is literally just getting comfortable with how that feels moving on snow with crampons as opposed to on grass and mud with running shoes. So that's part of it. And also literally just all of the gear. There's so much more gear that you have to use when it's really cold and you're on snow and you're dealing with ropes and stuff like that. So that's, I think, the piece that's really missing is that final step of taking the fitness and then putting it actually in the specific place where I'm going to be, which is on big snowy mountains. So looking at gear, looking at, you know, things as simple as, okay, can I open my zipper pockets with big mittens on? Things like that, that you might not think about, but this is why I want to have, a month or so on these mountains before I go to Everest to make sure all that stuff is 100% dialed. And then, of course, the altitude is the other big thing, making sure, like we talked about earlier, that the what we're seeing on the bike in terms of dealing with hypoxia is translating well to those higher altitudes on real big mountains. I think that's the other big piece that we will find out in April for sure.
Okay. Well, I'm very proud of you because again, this is a sport where you don't have 8 trainers and a big entourage and 5 agents doing everything for you except the actual work. So you have to run your whole life in a
Thank
foreign
you.
country here, which you like, but it's a foreign country and a big city and you have to get everything done yourself and you still have to do all this training and then you have to deal with the trials and tribulations of life in addition to the trials and tribulations of generators breaking and other things. So I'm
Yeah.
very proud of you. You've done a
Well,
great
thank you.
job,
And
I think.
and I may not be LeBron James, but I do have a huge team of people that support me, including you guys, including people here in Keto, including Jim Corville, my agent. So I've got Kat, who's and Jason, who are helping edit this podcast and doing all of our social media stuff. They're fantastic. So I really do have a big team of people. I've been so lucky to surround myself with fantastic people for a long time, and just I've leaned on them a lot. So I give tremendous props and gratitude to them as
Okay.
well. This is, yes,
Good to hear.
you're right to an extent, but also like I've got a lot of help and it makes it so much easier for sure.
Good. Okay. Well, next time we talk, we'll actually probably be in person. Um,
I know it's very exciting.
be
I'll
in
see you in a couple days.
Massachusetts. And then next time we record a podcast, you will have passed through Massachusetts, and hopefully at that point we'll be in Nepal.
Fingers
Um,
crossed. I'm crossing my
yeah,
fingers.
with all your gear. So,
Yep.
to walk us through the next week, it's going to be a busy and exciting one. And how you're going
Yeah.
to keep your training up while you're in the middle of it, and anything else of note.
Well, the big thing is after this kind of take two for the big hypoxic workout tomorrow, which I'm still in keto tomorrow, and then I will leave the next day. Once I'm done with that, I've kind of written this week as just like, whatever in terms of training. I remember we talked about this when I got back from Switzerland as kind of the takeaway from that trip was give yourself a lot of grace, be really patient, and have really low
Right,
expectations. So,
right.
from a training perspective, it's really just this would be a recovery block anyways, which would be, 3 or 4 days of, 60 minutes of jogging or stairs or whatever, super light training. So regardless of the travel, I would have very low expectations for these few days anyway. And it's not an accident that this is all, all lined up, obviously. So it will really just be probably a bunch of treadmill workouts like at your house in the Doha airport in Kathmandu. Because it is a very long journey. I leave my house on Tuesday morning. I get to your house on Tuesday night. I leave for Doha on Wednesday night. I get to Kathmandu on Friday morning because we lose like a whole day with the time zone almost.
Yep.
And then I will probably, the absolute best case scenario, I will fly up to Lukla on Saturday morning. and then it's from there, it's still like an entire day of running at a decent clip to get to where I'm going to be based. So best, like if I'm there by Sunday, like a week from today, it would be like a miracle.
Uh-huh.
Like if that's how it works. So Tuesday morning to Sunday night, let's say, is kind of door to door best case scenario from my house in Quito to my new home base in the mountains
Yep.
of the Khumbu Valley in Nepal.
Yep. Yep. We can say what we want about the world getting smaller, but it's still a long ways in that case from one spot to
Yeah.
the next. Hmm.
Yep. Sure is.
Hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you in a couple of days. So stay safe. I hope your workout tomorrow goes well. And
Thank you.
anything
You
else
too.
before we end here?
No, let's wrap it and let's get to the cool down.
Okay, for today's cool down, we're introducing a new project, Run Manaslu. So, Tyler, you're announcing a new book project based on your Is it Manaslu or Manaslu?
I've heard it said both ways. I honestly don't
Okay.
know. And now I'm thinking
Okay.
about it, and it's like when you're overthinking a word, and I can't even remember which one I say. I think I say Manaslu. Yeah,
I
Manaslu.
think you
That's what I
do.
say.
Mhm. All right, we'll agree on Manaslu, and then we should probably look it up somewhere.
Yep.
So you're focused. So you're announcing a new book project focused on your Manaslu comeback after your Achilles surgery. So what inspired you to document this journey in book form rather than just the normal way you've done it? And how will this differ since you just released a film about this whole journey as well? How will it differ from the film?
So I think this is actually the third book I've tried to write. I actually really love writing. That was kind of my first passion. Was back in middle school. I think it was Miss Capetta at Fenn, and then Fitz at Fenn really connected with me, both of them, about writing, and that was kind of my first creative love. I mean, music I'd done since I was like 6 or whatever, but that was really the first thing that spoke to me. I think that was even before I kind of started playing guitar, or maybe it was right around the same time. So I think that was the first creative thing I ever wanted to be, was a writer. And I spent a lot of time and effort thinking about that when I was a student, and then eventually kind of ended up going more towards the math science side, but have always kept that creativity part in my mind. And I do a lot of writing. Long story short, I thought about writing a book the first time I went to Aconcagua, and then I didn't. I failed. I wasn't successful on the route that year, and then I went back the next year, and that was when uh, I set the Aconcagua record and the Kilimanjaro record, and I probably got like 50% of the way done with that book, and I was really leaning heavily on my training logs, and it just wasn't working. I couldn't find a process that worked for me. My schedule was just too busy to commit to time to writing. And I just didn't feel like the training logs were working. Like I was going to have to rewrite everything from scratch. And that felt like a really daunting amount of work. And it wasn't until we were pretty close, like to the final cuts of the film, at the end of last year, maybe, that I started thinking, you know what, this is a really cool story, and we kind of have the narrative arc already. And I wonder if I could take this and put it into a writing project. And that was when I talked to you guys about it, I remember, and started actually just making a habit of it. And and it was so funny because I really just approached it uh like it was a training project. Like it's literally a tab on my training spreadsheet is like Monopoly book project. It's like I have like every day, okay, here's how many words I think I can write this day. And I will line that up with my training. So it's like, oh, if I have a really hard day of training, then that number is lower. And when I have like a long flight or something, then it's much higher. And it's kind of funny because it's like a glimpse into my brain, I guess, of this is how I do anything. But I think once I had that system in place, then it became a really fun thing to work on, because I had this accountability for myself where every day I was like, oh, I'm tired. I might want to go to bed, but I haven't got my 1,000 words in that I said I was going to do today. And so I've got to do it. So that, I guess I'm getting a little bit into the process side, but in terms of that's kind of the why I wanted to write a book, and how I've gotten to this point of actually having the book almost finished, which is why we're talking about it now. And in terms of kind of the difference between the film. I mean, the big difference is, the film is 25 minutes and the book is going to be a couple hundred pages, right? So it's a much, much more in-depth look. There's a
Hmm.
little bit more, I'd say, uh, like fleshed out story of my trips to Nepal. So personally, I think it reads really fun and fast. It's kind of part travel log and part adventure log, and there's also some backstory. And I just think it's an interesting narrative arc, that whole year of going from this point where I literally was unsure if I was going to continue as a professional athlete at all, and I was going to retire and go get a job, like a real job, to everything just kind of the stars aligning, and getting surgery and coming back and having it go so well. And obviously still huge bumps along the way, but coming back that next year, it was just, it's probably been the most important year of my life so far in terms of everything that happened. And
Hmm.
having those really detailed training logs from that year was helpful to be able to go in and tell that story in a really detailed way. And so, yeah, I think it's a much more fun, engaging way to share the story than the video. To really, I hope it really gets people there in terms of being in Nepal with me on the mountains, for better and for worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think I'm very much looking forward to it. You are a great writer,
Thank
and
you.
writing is such a different medium. So, most people don't notice just how different it's a different way of thinking, literally. And so
Absolutely.
to me, and you can go through, for anybody who's read a book and watched the movie, they're very different by definition. And you can
Yep.
get good movies, bad books, bad movies, good or good both or bad both, right?
Yeah.
There's some connection usually, but actually there isn't even that much connection oftentimes after a while, because to tell something visually in a movie has to be done so differently. You have to what you have to do is try and get the essence of the ideas out of the book and then make them come to life in the movie. So to me, yeah, I think it's a different experience and wonderful. Both are wonderful, generally
Yeah.
speaking. And
I,
and
lo- I love
I'm looking,
watching movies of books I've read and vice versa. Like, I will almost always do both. Even if like the movie got completely panned, I will often watch it just because it's like, oh, I've really liked that story and I want to see how it's presented. And
yeah,
sometimes I'm like, God, that was terrible. But even still, sometimes it's fun to just go back and be in that place again and relive that story of, because
yeah,
usually it's like, oh, I read the book like 3 years ago and then the movie comes out or something, right? So it's
right.
it's fun to just go back
Yep.
to that.
Yep. And I will give a recent example and give a shout out to a book called Lessons in Chemistry, which is one of the best
Oh, I
books
like
I've
that
read in the
book.
last decade.
Yeah.
Terrific book. And then the movie came out. Terrific. Well, it wasn't a movie. It was one of those, TV miniseries, HBO or
Mhm.
some network. I can't even remember which one. Did a miniseries on it. Also great, in my opinion.
I actually have
Really
not
different.
watched that one.
It's great. Yeah,
I
I
should
think
watch
it's
it.
great.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
it can't be the book, right? It just can't be the
No.
book. There's lots of things
No.
that are different about it.
Yep.
But it gets the same idea across of all the really important, really great parts about lessons in chemistry. So yes. Okay. So everybody read books. A,
Yeah.
read
Definitely
books
read
in
books. I
general.
love
They are
books.
very different. And B, read Tyler's book once it comes out.
Thank you.
Okay, so this book is focused on this tumultuous year that we've talked about before. We talked about it in the context of the movie, between your first attempt to set the record on Manaslu and it failed, and then the second time when you were successful. So talk about this theme of learning from failure, your physical recovery from surgery, your successful return, and how that's going to come throughout, and what how that's driving the book's arc.
I think that learning from failure is a big theme in my life in general, and probably in almost everyone's life if you look at it. I think we were talking
That's the
earlier on this
cliche, right?
podcast.
You learn more from failure than
Yeah,
success,
right.
right?
And it's a cliche, but cliches are often based on truth. And I think this is
Oh
one
yeah.
where that 100% is the case, because yeah, I, you know, it's funny because I have learned a lot from the things that go really well. I don't want to say that that you don't learn from things from success as well. The record on Manaslu was great, and I learned a tremendous amount on that day, of from things that went well from when I did set the record, and that has informed how I'm preparing for Everest now. So I don't want it to seem like, oh, you only learn from your failures, because I think
Yeah.
that is taking the cliche too far. But at
Yep.
the end of the day, I think that for me, especially in my personality, I thrive by being told that I can't do something, and I'm sure that you resonate with that for me going back to childhood, which is,
Yeah.
whether it's literally, oh, you're not allowed to do that when you're a child, to, you don't fit this mold as an athlete, and you're never going to be successful. That I heard that so many times, especially in my early career, from my college coach, all these things. Oh, you don't fit the mold. You're not the right kind of person to be this kind of athlete. That has inspired me so much. Like, that gives me so much motivation. And I feel the same way with failure, that when I try to do something and I fail, yes, like we were just talking about the temper tantrum and then problem solving, but that is exactly how I deal with failure. Is, I might have an emotional reaction. I'm human. I'm going to be upset. But then I think I very quickly switched to taking that failure and using it as a source of problem solving, and also a source of inspiration and lighting the fire for the next thing. And I think the obvious example is failing on Monopoly and coming back and doing it the next year, but that is such a gross oversimplification, because it's happening all the time, on a literal day-to-day basis, as well as a, month to month and even season to season basis, when you have especially really big goals where you work really hard for them, and then if they don't go well, that is super frustrating in the moment, but it also forces you to do this post-mortem, and then you learn so much, and then you take that combined with the kind of chip on your shoulder, like, I'm going to show them next time attitude. And that's like the secret sauce for me. And I think that was what made me so successful last summer in terms of training, and then led to the record on Monopoly. So I think, to me, it's that combination. It's both the problem solving and the inspiration slash like chip on your shoulder side, that's the perfect storm.
Great. Okay. So I love to watch interviews with authors all the time because I like to write too. And I
Mhm.
love, and everybody always asks, what's your process of any
Yeah.
author? What's your process like? So you've talked a little bit about it. So I don't know if there's more to add, but I had this question out there. So I'm
Yeah.
going to ask it of you. What's the writing process been like? Has it given you any new insights that weren't apparent during the actual period that you were, that you're writing about?
Oh yeah. Well, let me answer the second question first, because that's almost more interesting. You know, I do keep very detailed training logs, as anyone who is subscribed to my Substack knows. And I've been keeping those for decades at this point. And I went back and read a lot of those in preparation for this book, not just this one year, but many years going back and looking for patterns and things like that. So not only was it just really fun because it brings back all these memories to read, like I could literally read a run entry that's like 4 sentences from 3 years ago, and I can immediately see that I was that day. Like, I can remember what I was listening to. If I was listening to an
Wow.
audiobook, I can remember
Mhm.
what conversation Connor and I were having that day. Like, it's crazy. Like, I don't know. I have like a weird Rain Man thing with like memory about runs. So that's number one. It's just been really fun to rekindle some of those memories, and both in this one year that is really the focus of the book, as well as just way farther back. And also seeing bigger patterns. I think we talked about it at some point on this podcast, but one of the things that I noticed, especially in the last year before my surgery, so that would be, um, you know, kind of early 2024, like 2023 to 2024, I just could not get through like a week of training without my Achilles impacting my ability to train. It was every single week there was, oh, my heel hurts so much today and I could barely walk on it. And, so I biked instead of doing this like 20-mile long run that I had planned. And so it was exactly the opposite of this consistency that we've talked about, with regards to this training block that I'm in right now for Everest. So that was one of the things I noticed was just this huge, when you zoom out and you see it and you read it all in one go of like, 6 months of training, it's so obvious. And I'm like, oh God, you poor dude. Like you need to take care of that, man. And it's so obvious in retrospect, but when you're in it, it's like, oh, well, maybe this week will be the week that everything is fine. And it never is. And it's just the same pattern. But, when you see it in retrospect, it's, hindsight is 2020. Yeah, I absolutely have seen things that I probably wouldn't have noticed in the moment. Now looking back in retrospect. So it's been a really fun and fascinating process. I would say in terms of my writing process, like I said before, I definitely have taken like my uh, obsessive little controlling, organized, self-disciplined, whatever words you want to use there. I've definitely taken that approach. So I literally do have like word count goals for each day, and those do correlate with how busy and tired I think I will be that day.
Uh-huh.
I will shout out Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, which is a great book. Cal Newport, I really like all of his books, actually. I think he writes really well about work and productivity and mindfulness.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
Great guy, worth checking out. And he basically says like there are some things that you really just have to do. You have to have time and do them without distractions. And for me, writing is one of those. Like I can kind of thumb type my training log in the back of the car to just like write, okay, this is how I felt and this is what I ate and this is what my heart rate was. But like to do this kind of writing, for me, like I need to sit down and turn off my internet and have like at least an hour. And so that is my writing process. And it's usually in the evening is what I found. It's literally the last thing I do. So I literally I will get in bed, turn the lights off, turn all my internet off, turn my phones off, and then I will sit with my laptop open and I will literally put a lo-fi girl hip hop playlist on. It's like, if you know, it's like one of those things. It's this YouTube channel that's just like lo-fi instrumental hip hop beats. I put that on and I put my little squeezy hyper ice boots on with a 1 hour timer. And when it's done, I'm done writing and that's it. Like that's my routine. So like, and I find that
Okay.
when I'm in that state, especially because I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to write that day. So I will often finish, like the last thing I'll do is I'll say, okay, here's where I am in my story. Right now, I'm kind of like finishing up and working, but I've been working chronologically. And I'll say, okay, I'll write like 6 bullet points of like, okay, these are the next 6 things that I'm going to write about. So it's like, okay, I did this, and then this thing happened, and then this thing happened, and then this thing happened, and then this. And so then I can spend the next day kind of thinking about that, refreshing. Oh, yeah, there was that cool thing. I want to talk about that and this and that. And so I really have a pretty good idea of what I want to say by the time I sit down to write. And then once I start writing, it is just like, it's a fire hose. Like I can go nonstop for an hour and I could probably write 2,000 words in an hour if I'm moving well, So I feel like that process for me of separating the literal mechanics of writing the words on the paper from my brain versus the thinking about it and brainstorming, that all happens like, while I'm running or at the grocery store or whatever. And then once I sit down, it's like I have that space and it works really well for me.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for giving us some insight.
Yeah.
So there's an exciting Kickstarter campaign that's going to be starting that you're launching for early access to the book. So tell us about that. What special perks, experiences can supporters look forward to, particularly regarding live Q&A sections that you'll be hosting?
Yeah. So this is something I was super stoked about. First of all, to just give you guys access to me and the writing process. So we will have a whole bunch of different levels of ways that you can support this project. Obviously, you can just pre-order the book. That is tremendously helpful for authors because there's this whole thing about basically the more pre-orders you get, the better your Amazon ranking does and all that kind of thing.
Yep. Yep.
So on the lower end, you'll be able to just pre-order the book. And then we'll also have some higher end packages where you can get a physical copy of the book versus just an ebook. Yes, I will have a live. I think it's going to be a monthly Q&A that we do as the book is coming out, and then afterwards, even with whoever wants to join. We'll also I think every single person who pre-orders the book will also get access to our Slack channel on Chosky, which will have a private group for all those pre-orders. So you can just kind of DM me, ask me questions there. I'll be online probably once a week responding to questions.
Okay.
So that's super cool. And then, yeah, we have like some, higher profile packages where it's like, we'll bring you a rock from Mount Everest or some signed posters and things like that. So if you really want to support, we love your support. It's awesome. We really appreciate it. And if you want to just buy the book, please buy the book. It really helps us. And I love writing. And hopefully we'll have another book coming after this one.
I'm sure there
That's a
will be.
tease.
Okay. And lastly, in our continuing effort to support the community, so for athletes or non-athletes going through their own recovery process or facing difficult, some seemingly insurmountable challenges, what's the one message from this book you hope resonates most strongly and might help people out?
I think it was Annie Duke in the book Quit that you and I, Mr. Steve, talked about a lot,
Yep.
who brings up this idea of, how much will this matter to you in, an hour and a week and 6 months and 5 years? And I think that's a really helpful way to look at anything you're going through. I think when I was going through really hard times, which, I talked about in the film and I'm talking about in the book, I think one of the things that I wished I had heard more was just like, it won't always be like this. Things will change. You will not always feel like this. The feelings that you're feeling are real. They are legitimate, but you won't feel like this all the time. And I think when you're going through something really hard, whether that's an emotional challenge or, something in sport or in work or in your personal life, whatever it is, it can feel so overwhelming that it's impossible to imagine your life not feeling like that. And that is a one piece of advice I wish I'd heard more of, was just it it will get better and you will not feel like this forever. And so that would be my advice. I think that the cliche would be, oh, there's something to learn there. And there is, but I think that's the number one thing. If you're really going through a hard time, just know, like, no matter what it is, it could feel like the biggest deal. And it could be a really big deal. Like if you have like a partner die or something like that, or child die, God, you have terrible things that happen to people, but still, like, people go on to live lives. And it doesn't mean that you're not honoring that event that has happened to you and that has shaped you in some way, but it also doesn't mean that it's going to completely dominate your life for eternity. So that's that I hope is kind of my TED talk, is just that you can take something away from this, that is it won't be like this forever.
Okay. Thanks so much. We'll look
Excellent.
forward to the book, and I'm certainly excited about it. Want to read us out?
Thank you. Yeah, I will read us out. Thank you, guys. As always, please send us any feedback, question, comments, concerns, hopes, dreams. Oh, and you know what? Before I read us out, gosh, you guys, I should probably give you some URL for our Kickstarter. That will be on my website at tylercandrews.com. We'll have a banner at the top, and tylercandrews.com/Manaslu. That'll have all the things about both the film and the book. You can do that, and we'll also post a link in the show notes. So that should definitely be there, so you guys know where to find all this stuff, because it should be live by the time this episode goes live. So go check that out, please, guys. If you're interested in the story, if you want to support, go order a book. It really helps us out. I love writing. I think the book is going to be fantastic, and I'm excited to share another story of going to Everest. And this one will definitely set the stage for that. So please go ahead, do that. Check it out. Purchase an ebook if you want. That'll be super cheap. And if you want a higher end thing, go for it. And with that, now I will read us out. So yes, please send us any feedback, as always. Your usual questions, comments, concerns, hopes, and dreams. You can send those to me, ty@chosky.run, or DM me, Tyler Sanders, on Instagram. And remember, as always, this is multimedia, and you can read my raw training logs at tylercandrews.com/blog, or on Substack at Tyler C. Andrews. Ty's Training is a Chosky Media production, brought to you by the good folks at Chosky Endurance Collective, the world's leader in online coaching, travel, and community for endurance athletes. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Ciao.